Okay.
Okay. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
All right. So Nicole is the co-organizer of Black Birders Week, founder of Black and National Parks Week, a member of the National Parks Conservation Association's Next Generation Advisory Council, and through her company And Her Nature, provides nature coaching and life coaching services for Black women seeking life balance through meaningful nature experiences. She's interested in connecting communities of color to nature in more engaging, inclusive, and equitable ways. Nicole's also an Ohioan, so she received her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Education and Interpretation from The Ohio State University, and she's worked for various environmental nonprofits throughout Ohio as an informal environmental educator. She also worked on the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist Program, so if any of you in attendance are, yep, there's an OCVN grad in the chat right now, so she might have helped you put that program together. She's also an avid birder and a nature photographer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Nicole.
All right. Can you hear me okay? All right. Thank you so much for that introduction, Maria. I'm super excited to be here this evening with you all. Welcome. I am presenting from Columbus, Ohio, which is where I live. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, but I've been in Columbus for about 13 years, I believe. I can't believe how much time has passed. But I want to share with you my journey up until this point, my career of environmental education, bird watching, and all things nature. So I'm really excited to be presenting and sharing a little bit of myself, but also the work that I've done over the past decade. So hopefully you find more than one connection with what I share, and I'm excited to have you all participate if you can. So let's get the presentation. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
All right, awesome. All right, so my presentation is called Nature Connection, a Network Approach. I am super excited, again, to share my background. A lot of the photos that you'll see throughout this presentation I've taken, so I'm excited to share those, as well as my connection with community. So I would like to know from everyone, I took this picture actually in Ithaca, New York. I was working on some filming with some staff from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So this is October of last year. So it is October. It hasn't even been a month yet, I think, of fall, but I'm super excited to see all of the fall colors. And this very much reminded me of that time where I got to visit and explore some of Ithaca. Absolutely gorgeous. This was an early morning day, so there's definitely a lot of fog, but once the sun came out and shined its light on all the beautiful colors, I was just in awe. So what are you enjoying so far this season? If you'd like to share that in the chat, please do. For me, it's always the fall colors, but also the birds that show up. I know winter won't be too far behind. So I'm excited to see the ducks that show up in Ohio. I love the ducks just because they're just really cute, and I have access to them right in my backyard. And now that I have a camera, I can take many pictures of them. So a little bit about me. I'm a native of Cleveland, Ohio. I actually have 10 siblings, so 7 sisters and 3 brothers. Really big family. Raised by a single mom. Her name is Gail, and she is in her 50s, so she's actually still pretty young. And nature has always been something I've been connected to, and actually something that I very much still connect to because of for the benefit of my mental health. So I'll talk a little bit about that as I move forward, but that was kind of my introduction into building a relationship with nature, was through trauma I experienced at a young age, and it's pretty much saved my life. So I I love making connections and learning new things. So nature has really helped me expand on that. There's so many opportunities to engage with self through nature experiences. So I feel like that's something we can all learn and experience as we get older, and hopefully share with others. So how it all began for me, TV. Television was my thing when I was younger, especially having so many siblings. We watched a lot of cartoons. I preferred more of the nature shows. So like anything I was learning about the natural world, animals, plants, ecosystems, all of that stuff, I just ate it up. It was just so engaging for me. So nature on PBS, Cleveland, WVIZ, that was my jam. Wishbone, as far as reading and just giving me another way to access the world, was through reading and books and visiting the library. So the picture in the bottom right is a picture of Scranton Library in the neighborhood that I grew up in Cleveland. And I would visit that a lot just to get books. Like I remember getting like 10, 15 books at a time on different nature topics. And I just fell in love with reading, knowing that there's so much to learn about nature and the outdoors. So some personal, I guess, challenges and professional challenges that I experienced moving into my college career. So being the first one in my family to go to college is really tough. I didn't have a lot of support just because people that I grew up with didn't really understand my interest in nature. And I really actually didn't talk a lot about it in relation to my trauma that I experienced when I was younger. And that was something really hard to help other people understand and connect with, just because it was something I was still learning about and growing into. So as far as having that kind of foundation and support system to help embrace those interests in nature, there wasn't too much of that earlier on. And then financially, having to apply for scholarships, not getting too many, and saving money was really difficult, especially having so many siblings. And I was pretty much teaching my mom about college because she didn't graduate from high school. So I was learning about college, but also teaching her about, applying and things that I would need to have before I moved to Columbus, and, thinking about my grades and having mentors and applications and all of those things. I was teaching my mom and learning at the same time, which is really stressful and difficult. The other thing was professional mentors, not really having any or seeing any that looked like me, especially in the beginning, like my first and second year of college. I actually wanted to do veterinary medicine, and I wasn't seeing, I didn't think any Black or brown veterinarians existed. And that was pretty much my world for the first couple of years of college. I do remember taking a few classes, like introductory classes, but I rarely had any conversations with other Black or brown students about veterinary medicine and how they got into the field. And then just being introverted, a young introverted Black girl interested in nature, I felt alone a lot because the world we live in is very extroverted, especially in professional settings. You kind of have to have, a lot of energy and be very social. And not that I wasn't those things, it was just kind of a slow burn. Like I would take my time to build relationships with people, and I would get drained pretty easily doing a lot of networking. So that was something that I had to learn quickly when I got to college, as well as having multiple interests. I know in college, you're expected to, I guess in the beginning, you're encouraged to explore and be curious about your career paths. But at the same time, as I got further into my career, I was fine with having multiple interests, but I was constantly being told to focus on one thing. And I didn't have a lot of guidance or resources that would help me embrace more of that kind of interdisciplinary learning that I wanted to have in college. So an opportunity presented itself after I realized I didn't want to do veterinary medicine. And then, I ended up exploring a bunch of different options. I found out about the School of Environment and Natural Resources through The Ohio State University. And I applied for an internship to work at the Grange Insurance Audubon Center through the National Audubon Society. And we actually did a retreat together. So these were other young leaders from across the country. We actually were able to come together and talk about projects that focused on bird conservation. So this was my first kind of official environmental ed internship. And it was something I was really interested in just because, I had a lot of questions. I was just leaving veterinary medicine as a vision for my future, but it opened up opportunities for me to connect with others that were interested in the environment and nature and creating community projects. I was then brought into another network community, the Children in Nature Network. They had a natural leaders legacy camp that happened in Washington State. I'm going to go back to that first slide of community engagement and opportunities. This was actually my first time flying. So this was 2011. I've never flown before. I was terrified, even though it was like less than 40 minutes on the plane. But I very much enjoyed that because it was another way for me to challenge myself because I knew where I was going. I wouldn't have the opportunity again. So I was able to overcome the fear with my excitement and curiosity of just meeting more people that were interested in the things I was interested in. So the Legacy Camp, there was about 54 of us, young leaders across the United States. And we came together again to talk about nature and the environment and community engagement and how do we share our stories to engage with our communities around getting children, youth, and families connected to nature and the outdoors. So from that retreat experience and leadership camp, I was able to create my own community events in Central Ohio, so different parks, different metro parks, different city parks. I did that from 2014 to 2017 with a couple friends, literally just voluntary, hey, let's create these events that focus on nearby nature and people utilizing their parks outside of sports. And that was a really fun opportunity for me to learn more about the different neighborhoods, the people, what they were interested in, and how I could engage them using resources that they were familiar with. So like YMCAs, libraries, rec centers, and the nature components, including wildlife and plants in those parks. So these are some questions for the audience just to think about. You don't have to type anything in the chat, but I always think about this when I'm engaging around like facilitating or teaching, working with nonprofits or working with community groups. I think it's important to think about these things when you're kind of externally engaging with community, is to kind of go back to self, like what are your interests? And what keeps you growing from what you're learning and what you're even what you're unlearning. So for me, it's always, how do you learn? How do you teach? What do you consider your strengths in this work as an educator, as a community resident, as a program manager, whatever your title is? And do you consider what do you consider your weaknesses? So I always kind of tap into that, especially if I know I'm not an expert at something, I can reach out to someone who is to help me get the work done. So I'm putting less pressure on myself as a facilitator, as an educator. And then how can you turn these moments into teachable moments or opportunities for growth? So a few questions to think about. If you want to answer one or two of those in the chat or just kind of reflect on those, please do. So networking and conferences. I actually went to my first North American Association for Environmental Education conference back in 2013 in Baltimore, Maryland. And this was a community EE fellowship that was part of the conference. And this was one of kind of like the offsite programs that I attended, events that I attended, and I'm holding a bird of Rodney Stotts, who's a Black falconer in the DMV area. And his name was James. He's since passed. But that was a really cool opportunity for me to experience falconry and his work, working with underserved youth, and sharing his story of how he got into falconry and why that relationship is still so important to him. So rest in peace, James. He was so cute, and I got to hold him, and there's like a dead mouse that I got to feed him. So you can see bits of that. Sorry if you're not, if your stomach isn't okay for that, but this was a really fun opportunity for me to, again, connect with community leaders who have a focus in nature and want to connect more to community, but also are incorporating more of the storytelling into their programming. So back in 2020, as some of you are familiar with, kind of spearheaded things even more for my career as an environmental educator, as a environmental justice advocate, and as a nature enthusiast, kind of delving more into these more important conversations around race, access, representation, in the outdoors. So 2020 was the start of that. June, Memorial Weekend, going into June, we created a group of us, spearheaded Black Birders Week, which this is the third year that's taken place. So these are the first two graphics for our events. So the first one is for 2020, and the second one was this past year. So thinking about the narratives that we hear or share of that, within my own community and non-Black counterparts, that African Americans don't do nature things. So camping, biking, hiking, birding, all of those things. We wanted to showcase that we do those things, but also the importance of why it needs to be a deeper conversation versus just a surface level conversation, and to build more community around people who feel like they're the only one. I've seen a lot of Black people do these things. It's just not amplified as part of the mainstream, media and what we see on a regular basis around representation and diversity in the outdoors. So that's something that we created, literally hit the ground running with that week happened. It was crazy. Lots of interviews, lots of connections with people who are just getting into birding, especially with the start of the pandemic. People were looking for more opportunities to reduce the amount of work they were doing, but also just reconnecting to nature. So birding was an opportunity to do that. And then from there, in August, I created Black and National Parks Week, which focused on everyday Black people visiting national parks and wanting to amplify and highlight more of those stories. Again, I knew of a lot of people from my previous networks that were visiting national parks, and wasn't hearing enough or seeing enough of those voices and faces. So I felt like it was an opportunity for me to share more of that and my experiences also in terms of visiting national parks, including Ohio. There's a lot of history and connection to the start or the establishment of the National Park Service through the Buffalo Soldiers and their work. So that's something that I definitely wanted to delve more into, kind of as my own learning experience, but also let other people know that I wanted to highlight and share their stories as well, and again, build community. Out of that, I decided to, at the time I was working at The Ohio State University as a program coordinator. I was doing a lot around the environmental kind of academic topics that focused on networking. So bringing students, staff, faculty together to have conversations about environmental topics, as well as CBN programs. So working with Ann Baird, really helping her kind of highlight the importance of engagement outside of I guess, looking at just content, but also building relationships, whether it be through volunteering, through using portals online to engage and to share stories about our nature experiences. So that was something very new for me, but it was kind of an awakening because, again, it's 2020, a lot of stuff was happening. And I felt like I was pretty exhausted at this point, and I felt like I needed to make a decision of where I wanted to move forward before 2021 crept around the corner. So I decided to leave my position as a program coordinator for EPN and OCVN, and start my own business that focused on nature therapy for Black women. So with that, it was just an opportunity for me to unpack all of what I was going through physically, emotionally, mentally, and to just reset. So a lot of that had to do, again, with circling back to my nature relationship, but also using that as an opportunity to re-engage with nature in a different way, and use that as a healing tool so I can continue the work of connecting Black women to nature and other people to nature, but primarily Black women, just because that's something I feel like I've been wanting to do for a while. And I instantly think of my mom, again, raising that many children, 11 children, and never really having a break, never really having time to explore her own interests, time to heal, from stress and anxiety of being single parent. And, that was kind of the leap that I needed to take to also prioritize my needs. So during that time, beginning of 2021, I bought a camera, a Nikon Coolpix camera. It was a gift to myself after I left my job. And I told myself, you know what, don't do anything. Because people were like, what's next for you? And I'm like, I don't really know. I didn't have an answer, but I didn't want to have an answer. I kind of just wanted to rest, like focus on rest. And, to help with kind of this blockage I had from feeling so stressed and so anxious about my work and doing a lot of things and not taking enough breaks. So I got the camera and I just went out, pretty much every day, Olentangy Trail, and would just bird and look at, landscapes and animals and birds and just take pictures. Just got in this habit of being more present with nature, but also practicing how to use a camera, because that's something I haven't done before. I've been birding for 10 plus years, and I've always just used binoculars, and I always had this wanted to have this evolved connection with nature. So it's like, okay, if I get a camera, I can be tuned into these nature experiences on a whole different level. So I ended up doing that, and it was the best decision I made. Also thinking about practicing just basic routines of, getting up, not being, stressed about missing a meeting or planning something for the day, like literally just waking up slow, making breakfast, reading a book, listening to music, stretching, any of that stuff. I got back into the practice of doing that without feeling like, oh, I won't ever have time to do this because I'm so focused on work. And that was really important for me too. So I ended up doing that for about 2.5 months to get into a new rhythm of what my life was going to look like post pandemic, post start of pandemic. So I'm just going to share some of the pictures that I've taken. I'm obsessed with the moon. I really, really love the moon. So once I knew that there was a feature on my camera, a moon feature, I was like, yes, this is it. So I started taking more pictures of the moon. And then this is a picture at Hocking Hills, I believe. I'm forgetting where this is. Went to I'm blanking where this is, but it's Hocking Hills. I went with a few friends and really enjoyed just exploring the area, taking photos, and just kind of being immersed in nature. And like these beautiful waterfalls are always magical. So definitely want to get more pictures of those. This is in Cleveland. I'm forgetting where this was, but this is on the beach. Sanderlings. They were so cute. The shorebirds. Oh my goodness, they're so cute. I have so many pictures of these sanderlings. I was obsessed. I got video and pictures. So there was like plovers and red knots and ruddy turnstones. Like I was like a kid in a candy store looking at these birds. So that was a really fun experience to be back home and visiting these spots that I actually probably had never thought of, but I knew existed. And just like, yeah, I have my camera, take pictures, Nicole. And then a beautiful sunrise. Oh my goodness, the sunrises. This was actually, I want to say this was October, but the sunrises in the fall, like those are a whole different level. So like if you ever have a chance to watch a sunset or a sunrise in the fall, they are absolutely beautiful. This is a picture of an egret. And he has this plumage, the green for the breeding season, which again, this is along the Olentangy. There's herons, there's egrets. So I love just going to that spot to watch them fish. This one looked a little flustered just because the wind was blowing. And then not too far from the river, it's just like kind of park area. And I got a picture of this tree swallow by a garden, really cool, like sleek feathers. They're so cool to watch, especially when the bugs come up from the grass. This is a really cool picture that I took not too long ago. I'm going to say this was during the summer. This was an interesting photo because it has this lenticular dome. I don't know if anybody sees that on the top. I'm obsessed with clouds. I'm obsessed with everything nature. But I took a picture because I love the big, puffy, thick clouds. It reminds me of like shaving cream. And then I noticed this dome, like this dome lens-shaped cloud over it. So it's like, yes, I definitely need to take that photo. It was pretty darn cool. Now, this was a magic photo. Sorry if anybody is not okay. Again, with the dead things, sorry, but I'm fascinated. So this was a barred owl that I ended up spotting by accident. It was actually an adult with a juvenile. So this was the adult it caught. I think it was a squirrel. So it flew over pretty far away in the tree, but since my lens is like a really nice zoom lens, I was able to find it and see it perched up in the tree with its lunch snack. So watch that for a good 10 minutes. And this is a barred owl. So like, yeah, this is like something really cool that I got to witness and experience in a whole different way. I'm that person who sees something and I'm like, don't scream because you're going to scare the thing that you're looking at. But it was a really fun, awesome experience to see that right on the trail. And with owls, you definitely need to be careful around, you know, their energy and like invading their space and all of that stuff. So I made sure that I was a good distance away when I was taking the photo. Turtles, they're cute. Red squirrel. Red squirrels are so adorable. So I took this photo when I went to Hog Island in Maine this past August. Just a little like pond area, water feature on the island. And, you know, there was a bunch of warblers, and then every now and then you see the squirrels pop up, and I got this really cool picture of this red squirrel. They're so cute. So this is another picture at Hog Island. There is an active osprey nest. So I got to see the osprey. Fascinating, they're fascinating. And then just hearing them call, the juveniles were out playing around. And I got like 50 shots of these osprey, but this was one that I took that was really cool. Oh my goodness, look at those talons. Like fierce. This is a fierce bird. So moving forward, another question if you want to answer. Think back on your earliest memory, nature memory, and what made it memorable for you. I know because we get so caught up in work and putting on those hats of, doing programs and don't have a lot of time or resources, we forget about our initial connections to those places, those spaces, to nature. And I always encourage people to think back to what made you love nature, what was a moment that, kind of was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, I want more of this. Any of that sparks that curiosity and that sense of wonder, I feel like we always should go back to, especially when we're wanting to encourage others to connect to nature and the outdoors in their own way. And I think having those stories kind of tucked away, ready to go is what keeps that spark lit. So a few tips that I have for building a meaningful nature relationship with nature. Connect to what brings you joy. As you can see, I'm super excited about all the things that I take pictures of. Nature is just like this palette of things, like this charcuterie, I guess, board of things. And I'm always excited at what's around the corner. I never have anything planned necessarily, but when it happens, I hold it so much more dear to my heart. Practice being present, whether that's mentally, just listening, physically, kind of if you're sitting on grass or in the dirt, digging your hands, and feeling that connection can really center you. And brings out those endorphins, those happy, feel good endorphins are always good to help you be present. Embrace all of nature. So there's good and bad to nature, but I think it teaches us a lot of different things about ourselves. So with that, be open to receiving its messages and lessons. I've learned a lot about myself, what I like, what I don't like, what my triggers are, how to be more patient, how to be more compassionate, understanding the cycles and duality of nature, because there's life, there's death. And also knowing that you have a place in nature. It's not separate, but it's with. Add more nature time to your schedule. If it's 15 minutes of you getting outside to look at the fall colors, that's building nature time into your schedule. I love the mornings, getting up in the mornings. The sun comes through my window. I love being out when it's cold. I know it's cold. Some people are like, I don't like the cold, but knowing that the sun is going to come out and warm my face, that's really exciting to me. So appreciating the little things, even though it's I don't really know if I'm a fan of this, but there's joy in the little things. So make sure that you bring some of that into your everyday. So it's not just eventually I'll get around to it, or I don't have time. You can make time, and really committing to that. And then show gratitude. I feel like we don't thank nature enough. It provides so many things: air, beauty, sustenance. So yeah, just showing gratitude, being thankful, being appreciative of all of its benefits is something that I use throughout my life and continue to share with others. So it's not just this, again, disconnect or that, this hierarchy of humans are over nature, but again, we're with nature, and we have this relationship of building a support system of what we can give to nature and what nature can give to us. So for me, the journey continues. My goal is to inspire others to do what they love, follow their passion and purpose, grow and improve lifelong learning skills, challenge myself every day to learn something new, share my story with others as it is my truth in lived experience, learn from others, find mentors that celebrate and push me, and then remind myself that I am enough. Practice self-love. Self-love is so important. I don't think we do enough of it, or at least remind ourselves that we need to do more of it. Because it started with me, and even through my trauma and I guess craziness of what I went through when I was younger, I felt very defeated. I felt very lost. I felt very disconnected from everything and everybody. And nature was that extended hand, which is why I call nature my BFF, that extended hand that I didn't think, that I didn't know I needed, and let me know that that everything was going to be okay, and that I was the compass that I was searching for. Sometimes you have to be that for yourself, and nature really just opened my eyes to knowing that I could do that, and that I could share that with others and hopefully inspire others to do the same. So practice self-love. It's very much a part of, the teaching and learning aspect of our lives. And then just a meaningful reminder around environmental leadership, something that I've learned in my professional career. It's a really cool quote that I came across. Environmental leadership is not about changing the mindset of the group or individual, but in the cultivation of an environment that brings out the best and inspires individuals in that group. It is not the ability to influence others to do something they are not committed to, but rather to nurture a culture that motivates and even excites individuals to do what is required for the benefit of all. It is not carrying others to the end result, but setting the surrounding for developing qualities in them so they may carry each other. And with that, I am finished. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to get myself back up on the screen here if I can. Let's see.
Okay, should I leave this up, or should I don't want to.
If you want to put your email in the chat box, that would be great.
Okay, awesome. I see a bunch of stuff in the chat that I wasn't paying attention to. So yay, that's good.
Yeah, a lot of people shared their first nature experiences. I've been taking notes on the side here of the beautiful metaphors that you've had for nature. Nature as the extended hand is so beautiful and so powerful. Yes. I love that. And also nature as a charcuterie board. Who could forget?
Of all the yummy things, yeah.
So if you have questions for Nicole, feel free to put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A. We're going to spend the rest of the time this evening just answering your questions and chatting here. I was going to ask you actually if you have like one particular lesson that you've learned from being in nature that you would like to share.
The one that I mentioned is self-love. That's the biggest one, because I'm still, I don't know, I'm in my 30s and I'm still learning a lot about the importance of loving yourself. I think if you have that understanding of who you are, even if you're learning and evolving, nothing else can deter you or throw you off course. I feel like that's always going to be kind of like your constant, especially, in professional, there's so many conversations I've had with people who find, not to say that this is an issue, but their identity in their profession. But knowing that professions aren't set in stone, they're temporary. So if you don't have a specific job, or, you end up like, hey, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life, but things fall short, or something, crazy happens to where you have to shift and pivot. How are you keeping yourself afloat, I guess, during those hard times and those hurdles? So for me, nature has always been that constant, and has taught me to love myself. So when I am struggling, I can, have those conversations or affirmations or whatever with myself to know that I have the strength and will to move forward and not depend on something external to get me through. And I would hope, that's something that everyone else is kind of tapped more into, especially with the pandemic happening, especially for extroverted people. Having to transition from, being very social to not, doing as many social things, or being online more, not having as much access to people. That was something that was fine for me. I was fine with not being as social, but it was still very much a disconnect, because I felt like with being an introvert, it's all about recharging my battery. And I was like, okay, I love this alone time, this isolation, but I'm struggling. Once my battery was full, 100%, I needed to do something with that energy, and I wasn't able to connect with people right away. So that was definitely a struggle for me. So I had to find ways to love myself, to be like, okay, you need to, have this energy and this understanding that the self-love is important when you don't have people around. So that was helping, a lot with my anxiety and depression around too much isolation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's such a pressure to do more, especially if you're into conservation and nature, and there's so much to
Mhm.
protect and so much to do, that it's really nice to think of like refocusing to the self and making sure that you're taken care of, so that,
Yes.
you can more effectively do those things.
Yeah. And I think asking for help in those moments, because, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I can figure this out. And sometimes I couldn't. So it's like, it's good to just let yourself know, like, hey, I'm struggling. I need to reach out to someone, or I need to get out and move my body, or I need to write, or I need to, whatever that's getting that anxiety, the anxious energy out of your system.
So we've got a few questions in the chat here. Vicky would like to know, could you talk a little bit more about the work that you're currently doing? I'm assuming, Vicky, do you mean with And Her Nature? We'll just make that assumption.
Yeah, I'm doing all the
that's
things.
okay.
I'm doing all the things, but with prioritizing my health and wellness. So I want to try to incorporate that in everything that I'm doing. So whether it's, my In Her Nature business that focuses on nature therapy for Black women, showing other Black women that they can use nature as a tool. Nature is the therapy, I'm the coach. Helping them understand the layers of lessons that they can learn from creating meaningful nature experiences. And for some Black women, it's like, I don't have time, because I have kids, I have a busy work schedule. So it's what time do you have? And can you, within that little amount of time that you have, prioritize yourself a little bit more. So that can be, a nature walk. It can be, sharing your interests with other Black women, creating opportunities to socialize in nature, challenging yourself. You might have someone who's, I've always thought about kayaking. I'm too afraid to do it. So I'm helping them kind of challenge themselves, but also create memories and fun opportunities to engage with nature in a multitude of ways.
Thank you. So we've got a question here, and I will ask Gus and Sherry. I see your question. We will get to that. So Chris is asking, what is the largest impediment for people of color to get outdoors?
I would say community, just having more people that look like them to get out and do. It's not that there's not an interest in the things that are happening. It's just, okay, do I have someone, a friend or a neighbor that looks like me that can, even if it's just them starting it for the first time, building that community with people that you've grown up with or that are part of your community. I think it's a really crucial part of us doing more of those things. If you feel like you're doing it by yourself, it's a little bit more scary, because it's kind of having the understanding that you can do it by yourself, but like there's a build up to that. Like you want to start things with other people. And I think that's part of the conversations, some of the conversations that I've had. I've done a lot of nature things by myself just because I'm introverted. But that doesn't take away the fact that I would love to have more Black and brown people to do those things with, just because it involves culture, it involves language, it involves understanding of history. You know, my grandparents, my mom even was just like, yeah, you don't go in the woods by yourself. Even if you're exploring, even if you're interested, like you just don't do those things by yourself. So I think building community around doing more of those activities definitely needs to be amplified.
Yeah, and thinking about that, I've read some of the other interviews that you've done, and there's a complex relationship, it seems, with safety and the outdoors and
Mhm.
Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely from a historical standpoint, I'm sure all of you like different forms of exclusion from the outdoors, especially within national parks. That's a whole different layer of, you know, there's a time where Black people, Black families weren't allowed just because of Jim Crow laws and sundown towns and, you know, things like that, where you're just like, you're not, you know, not to go to certain places for fear of retaliation or even being killed um, because of the color of your skin. And that's very much something that we have to think about constantly. Um, Even though those things may not be at the forefront of our non-Black friends, counterparts, like that's something that we have to think about and kind of like um, battle with, you know, because it is very much like I am interested in these things and it might seem weird to my friends or family, but it's something I want to do. So you have to grapple with what would be the most risk and how are we having those conversations with each other to where it's not, you know, where you're dismissing or invalidating someone's experience and how they feel about trying something new in the outdoors.
Mm-hmm. Um, so I see a question here, and then we'll shift gears a little bit. Um, so obviously we're the Cincinnati Nature Center.
Mhm.
What can outdoor places like us, like an outdoor recreation place, a nature center, a park, do to help remove some of the barriers or overcome some of these impediments to you know, making nature feel more safe, or encouraging people who have traditionally been excluded from the conservation field?
Mhm.
Um,
I would say it's not the nature, it's the people. Want
mhm,
to reiterate that. I learned that with, I guess, the relationship I was building with nature growing up. I was definitely not a fan of people. Uh, I'm a survivor of abuse from being in foster care. And for me, I was not okay with being around people. Nature felt more safe to me than with people, just because of how I was treated. And I would say it's kind of similar to this perspective context, and not to say that everybody's like, you know, racist or you know, preventing other people from experiencing nature. It's just, are we willing to have those conversations when they come up? Are we willing to um, show concern and care for people who are experiencing racism, discrimination, um, exclusion, even? I've had instances where I've gone to parks with family members and I've been followed. I've been questioned for what I've, you know, done around bird watching or even just hiking. Um, or that, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of nature. It's for everybody. Yes, that is true to a certain extent, but I'm not talking about nature. I am talking about people and those encounters that turn negative. So how do you deal with that as they're happening? Do you dismiss it or you stand firm and say, okay, this isn't right, something needs to be done, and defend that person who's being harmed without it being, well, I don't ever want to go into the outdoors because the people that I was with, or the person that I was with who doesn't look like me, doesn't have my skin color, decided, you know what, that's not something I want to deal with. And that I feel like just makes the experience even more uncomfortable. And then you just don't end up going to future events or things that are happening at that location. So I think it really does have to do with what support you're getting in those environments. And it's reciprocated with you asking what people are interested in. And sometimes, there might be, people want to have family outings. So is there enough resources and tools for Black families to do that? Can they play music in a park? Can they hike with tennis shoes versus hiking boots? Like, those things come into play when the way the information is presented is not part of their everyday experience. So are you saying because that's not happening that you're not welcome here, even though you're not intentionally doing it, but that's the message that you may be presenting?
Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a big question with a lot of complex answers. So we appreciate that. So shifting gears, there's a question here from Tim. What are some of your successes in the work you're doing now with nature therapy? Have any fun success stories?
So I did an outing with a group of women. This was actually 2020. It's less than 10 of us. So this was when things were like really heightened and we weren't sure what was going to take place with the start of COVID, but I felt like it was an opportunity for us to disconnect from all of the chaos, especially around, the news and the media and just the fear around the pandemic, to recharge. So I put together a retreat at Mohican, or near Mohican State Park. So I took a group of women out, we hiked, we birded, we stayed at a cabin, and just experienced nature together. We shared stories. And that was a really enlightening moment. One of the women, she was from Sudan, and she was actually working on building, what are the buses? The vans, what are they called? I can't think of what I want to say, but transforming a bus into like a livable, what do you call it?
Oh, like an RV?
Yeah. So like,
that.
it was like a van or a bus that she was transforming in Cleveland. And when we did the outing, we went to a spot that had a water feature. You could see the boats and like the trees and all that stuff. And she started crying because it reminded her of home. So I just, stood there next to her and just, let her feel whatever she was feeling. But she was gracious enough to share, this scene, this nature, this landscape reminds me of home. And they were happy tears. I thought they were sad tears, but she's like, no, these are happy tears. It's connecting me back to what I'm familiar with. So a moment like that really just made me appreciate even more being a facilitator of that meaningful nature experience, because you never know what people are going through, what they need in those moments. And that was just very rewarding for me and for her.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very powerful. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, and I've got 2 fun questions for you from the chat.
Okay.
The first one is, do you have a favorite place in Columbus to enjoy nature?
That's a hard question. This is like the bird question, like, do you have a favorite bird? And I'm like, no, because any bird I haven't seen yet is my favorite, since there's so many. I really enjoy the metro parks in Columbus. And I think each one brings something very different, especially every season. I would say at the top of my list, just because of the start of my career, Scioto Audubon. And it's mainly because I don't drive. I use public transportation growing up in Cleveland, and I still use it when I moved to Columbus, Ohio. There's a bus that takes you to Scioto Audubon, so I can just walk to the park and bird. It was the first place that I worked around environmental education, but also it's a great space to just see a bunch of different habitats, wildlife, and for people to engage in a urban nature oasis.
Cool. And then the second fun question is, well, it was what is your favorite bird? But the other part of it is, what is your most favorite birding experience?
Ooh, Um, I've had some really cool ones. I would say, okay, so I took a trip to Oregon to visit a friend this past May for my birthday. And we went to Mount Hood, which is phenomenal. I've never been there. I've never been to Portland, Oregon, let alone Mount Hood. So we went to one of the trails. And I was literally, we were talking, I'm like, oh, it'd be great to see an American Dipper. And literally, like within 5 minutes, the stream, wherever the trail we were next to was a stream. And we saw an American Dipper and a baby like diving like into the water. And I was just like, I almost cried. I almost cried because it was the cutest thing. I've never seen an American Dipper and I've always wanted to see one. And the universe was telling me like, hey, this is your moment. So that was really cool.
That's amazing.
Yes, yes, yes. It was so awesome. So yeah, I was definitely on cloud 15 at that moment.
Awesome. Well, that's a great note to leave it on. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your insights with us. We really appreciate it. Just giving everyone a heads up, we will have our next conservation changemaker talk on November 9th with Priya Nanjappa, who is the Vice President of Conservation for the National Parks Conservation Association. She's also a toad scientist. So please do tune in for that. Everything's free. You just have to register. I'll put the link in the chat here. All right, so let me get that link for you. But otherwise, I think that that's it for the evening. So thank you again, Nicole.
Thank you all for your awesome questions. And thank you again for having me as part of your series. I had such a blast.